Okay, so before we get into writing effective content, I just wanted to take you through the elements of designing a good website. So there are 6 main elements that the user will see and that you need to make sure that you're across. Okay, so let's go through them. The first is knowing your user and business needs. The second is knowing the information architecture or the structure of a website. The third is to understand the interaction design, so where things are on a page. The visual design is next, and that's where all the colours come into play. The brand is quite essential too, because we want to communicate that personality of the website. And of course, probably the most important and why you're watching is for the content. Okay, let's go through each one of those elements in a bit more detail. So the users are an essential part of any website. We need to identify who they are and what they want to get out of the website. We've also got another group that we need to be aware of, and they're the business. We need to make sure that both the users and the businesses are aware of what the website's doing, and we need to ask them what they want to get out of it. The last thing we want to do is create a website, especially the content, that doesn't meet the user and the business need. Okay, the next thing was the structure or the information architecture, or IA for short. So this is usually created into a navigation structure. So when I say navigation structure or tree structure, I'm talking about perhaps, say, the top level of navigation. And then we want to explain what the next level is. So commonly, you'll see on a website that there will be labels for each one of these, and then you might go into this section and see a secondary navigation. I'll explain that in a little bit more detail. So the next thing is interaction design. Typically we create a wireframe, and this is basically where everything goes on the website. It's a little bit boring. We call this a grayscale wireframe, and it basically means that we concentrate on where things are on a page rather than focusing on the colours. This is where we start to add some content as well. So, like I was saying with the information architecture, we use that information architecture as the navigation in the website. So all of this would have been translated into the information architecture. We also add some elements that we can visually see and understand where things go. And it helps also with content because we know how long things are. Okay, the next thing is visual design. So the visual design of a website is commonly referred to as the colour or the typography or the fonts that we use. So it's the next level from a wireframe, and it gives that aesthetic appeal. It also gives that personality for the website. So you can see that this website uses green and blue as an accent colour, and it just has a little bit more life. The next thing that we look to is the brand. Now, how do we communicate that brand of the organisation to our users? Well, we need to do it in the content and we need to do it in the visual design. But the brand needs to be defined so the content and the visual design can abide by the brand guidelines. And that brings me to content. So content is king. It is one of the most important elements of a website. And we'll be looking at that in the next few modules of how to write effective content. Okay, so those 6 elements are one of the ways that you can look to create an effective website. Next, we'll be looking at the difference between writing for the web and writing for print.